the online prep. The online prep for this was me just saying, basically you had to draw economies of scale without knowing what these words were, and you'd have to memorize them. I'm not doing that this time, but I am asking you what they mean. And so see if you can right now, looking at this, fill in the letters that correspond with the appropriate places here. Here we're looking at a company as it increases its quantity, increases its scale of operations, that its cost per unit should go down to a certain point and then start running into diseconomies of scale. So see what you can do at first. Look this over, put in the letters appropriately. And I'm going to lead into a discussion of chapter 11 from this and our other page. Feel free to talk to each other, ask each other questions.
Minus 11 to the next one was my to the section. I forgot to respond to other people. Can I just go back and do that, or
it should be available till midnight tonight? Yeah. If you're online, you can print this out, or you can copy this down, but this will be in our learning module, chapter 4. Yeah, I'll put these above notes 27. All right. What are we measuring over time, over this? What are we measuring? Cost per unit. That's C. And we're measuring this over, quantity or scale. Do I have that there? Good thing this is a test run of my new test. So we'll have a G, and it'll be quantity / scale. So G, there we go. Thanks for being my test bed. But it doesn't happen on test day. That would suck. Now, remember behind this, when you hear a company that is yet to get to scale, they still have what to exhaust. They have economies of scale. So D right here, they have economies of scale yet to exhaust, and they haven't gotten to minimum efficient scale that's right here. So they have scale to exhaust, haven't gotten to scale. I mean, they could still make more with what? With less cost to it, right? So that's an important thing. As long as you can sell this amount of goods, if you can sell this amount of goods, you want to get to the point where they cost you the least amount so you have maximized your profits. There's nothing here about profit yet because we don't have any revenue here, but all other things equal, you want to get to this point if you can sell that amount, because so long as your revenue is higher than that cost, you're just maximizing your profits out to that point. Then companies will get to a point, this is called constant returns to scale, but I'm not testing you on that just because it's constant costs there. But minimum efficient scale means this is the minimum you need to produce to get to the lowest possible costs. But then at some point, the resources you're using are getting scarce. It's really hard to coordinate your operations. There's a lack of team spirit as an operation gets larger. You run into here, what here? Diseconomies of scale, A. By the way, I will be jumbling these A's, so don't A, B, C, and D, D. It won't be just like this. So don't memorize C goes here, right? Memorize what goes there. That makes sense? Not the letters, but the definitions. And then this is just a label for this curve, and this is the long run average total cost curve. Right up here, I think this is a giveaway. Right by the X is the X inefficiency, F. Now, what creates economies of scale? Here I'm telling you what creates them, but you need to come up with a sentence using cost and scale to define them. Remember here, at your output of 0 are your indivisible setup costs. Remember I showed you the plant, the Boeing plant in Everett, Washington? I just saw something the other day by chance where somebody was calling that indeed the largest building by volume in the world. So in order to produce one 777, they need to produce one gigantic, world's largest building and all the tools within it. So they started with that cost, and then as they built more, they're able to divide that indivisible cost by an ever larger number. And so what I'd say down here using cost and scale is, I think the best way for all of these is to say as scale increases, indivisible costs become divisible. By higher output, right? Rather than by 0, you're dividing by 1, then by 10, then by 10,000. So that large number gets divided by an ever larger number. Thus, the cost per unit is declining. And then lastly, lowering per unit costs. So as you're running a business, scale is quite important to you, and so are costs. So you're maximizing your profits. What are you going to want to do? I'm not asking you this here, but just for your edification. In order to keep your economies of scale, I don't know, more of them to achieve, what do you want to do with your indivisible setup costs? This is pretty simple. Yeah, just keep them as low as possible right now. Does that mean you're going to cut corners on your production process? Not necessarily, but you're not going to be wasteful, right? You're going to cut corners where it makes some sense, right? But you're not just going to lower, you know what? We're going to build this giant jet, but we're not going to build a building for it. We're just going to do it all outside, right? Because that's going to save us on indivisible setup costs. Good idea for Boeing to do that? Probably not, right? So certainly here you want to mitigate these, but not to the point where you're going to have an effect upon product quality or the perception of product quality. So specialization has to do with, as you make more of something, you're hiring workers and managers who are more specialized in a particular process of a large production method. So if you're looking, and again, remember back when I showed you those slides of the production assembly line for jets, and pretty impressive for me. I've been in those, like I told you, at McDonnell Douglas. Pretty impressive to see these massive pieces of capital being worked on by hundreds of people just along an assembly line, each doing a different process. But as so the B-21 Raider came out on Friday, I believe. It's our new $500 million penetrating, what do they call it? Long-range penetrating bomber. It can't be seen by radar. It's super high tech, but they built, I think, just a couple without an assembly line. They need to do that because they need to figure out, will this thing even work? And is it even radar absorbent? Will it even fly? It hasn't flown yet. They're doing all the design digitally and all the testing digitally for, I think, the first time for a bomber. And so my point being, they have probably a lot of people doing a lot of different things and not specialized on one thing doing it over and over again, because they're just building 5 or 6 non-production testing jets. Now, when they make the full cadre of them, they're going to make, I think, 100 or so to replace our B-52s and B-2s and B-1s. Then they're going to build at scale, and they're going to need to hire people, not somebody who does one thing, then another. You're going to hire people who are specialized in just the electronics, just the hydraulics, just the navigation. And so that leads us to here. And then hopefully, so this is especially true with defense contracting, our F-35, the jet that both takes off VSTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, and it's the Air Force jet, and it's the Marine jet, and it's the Navy jet. The idea was the first few copies were going to cost, I think, $200 million. But as they reached As they reach scale, right, as they make more, and that cost was going to consistently decline. And we're actually seeing that, and the Defense Department builds that into their budgets, builds that into their predictions of the budget they're going to need to finance these things. Now, on another note, there's also a lot of graft in there. There's many times where the defense contractors and then the Air Force officials, at least in the projects I've known, they co-house them and they know each other, they become friends. Is it necessarily that an Air Force officer is keeping them always at the lowest possible cost? I don't believe so. I think there's some, in fact, in today's New York Times, off the top of my head, sorry, is an expose about how Air Force officers are now going overseas to make millions contracting for foreign air forces and armies. And so there's no doubt we have some people in procurement of our defense materiel, our airplanes and such, that are hoping if I treat Boeing with kid gloves and I let them run over budget, what might they do later for me? Hire me, right? And no, not corrupt, right? But it is corrupt. They'll hire me later as a consultant because I know so much about the process. But notice if they've paid off people in the past, let's bring you on as a consultant. They bring people on as consultants who have been really kid gloves on the project and let them overrun. What message does that send to future people who are supposed to oversee them? Do the same thing. And this is called regulatory capture. It's something in Chapter 11 that happens whenever we have either a monopoly that's being regulated or a big defense contractor. Is often they get the government officials who are supposed to be overwatching them get captured by the industry itself, and they don't do the job on our behalf, but they do it on their own behalf and thus on the company's behalf. And so that's just a little story around specialization. Sorry, short story long. So here, just brass tacks, as scale increases, company, and you don't have to use these exact words, company can hire more specialized thus what? If I'm more specialized, I'm more what? And yeah, more efficient or productive. You could use that word, thus more. I'm going to use productive just because we've been using that word so much in this class. Now, how am I going to end this? Lowering per unit cost. So the other side of this that I just want to expand on rather than just giving you a definition is that when you, and I've discussed this before, the corporations that I've worked in, Boeing, Pacific Bell, that's now AT&T, they were obsessed with quality circles and quality. They probably have a new name for it. But if you go out and work in a corporate job, you'll be part of total quality management, probably renamed some way, where you look at a company process and you break it down. Okay, what's working, what's not working. You'll have a team come up with an idea. Okay, what's working best, what's not working. Okay, let's see if we can get everybody to do this certain procedure in a more efficient way. They roll it out, test it on a small scale. If it works on a small scale, they roll it across an entire company. So this could be any process a company does in any industry. In other words, what they're trying to do is, from experience of doing something over and over, they're trying to learn from that experience and do better in the future. Hopefully you're going to work for a company that's going to be a thriving company, and a thriving company isn't one that's just saying, hey, our profits are pretty good. Cool, let's go home. Right? They're always worried about the future and a competition, and can we do this better, and can we learn from experience? And that is learning by doing. So back to this, as scale increases, companies, various ways to say this. Learn from experience. Best practices. making them more efficient. How should I end this? Very good, lowering per unit costs. Now, when companies are able to do all of this, and when companies are able to amass capital to exploit all these reasons for economies of scale, they then can become so large and efficient that they're not going to they're not going to be targets for competition. Why? How in the world am I going to compete with that company that's reached huge scale and has such low cost? They are going to be in a monopoly position. If they're in a monopoly position, they're going to be one of two things. They're either going to be a monopoly that's innovative and a monopoly because no one else does what they've done, and maybe they've got a patented innovation, or they're going to be a company like maybe something that would become a regulated monopoly. So a regulated monopoly would be, who do you pay to? Who are some regulated? PG&E, Cal Water, Comcast, Waste Management, I think are the regulated monopolies here. Those are all companies that have given the franchise, which means the exclusive right to deliver those services to you. We allow those to be monopolies because if you have just one company providing that product, then they can produce it at scale. And then when they're regulated, be able to charge a price just above these low costs and still make a profit. Now, remember here, there's another story though. So our PUC, our Public Utilities Commission, that is meant to regulate regulated monopolies, at times also becomes captured. That you'll have people who decide your PG&E rates, your, back in the day, your cell phone rate or your home phone rates, your garbage rates, where the people on that commission get jobs in consulting afterwards. And if they've been nice to the company, meaning mean to the ratepayer, they then get rewarded and they get captured by the industry. You guys decide how to fix this problem, but it's endemic. It's part of capitalism and our ways of trying to control capitalism. If monopolies are consistently bad, we try to break them up, but we obviously don't have the resources to do that. And not having those resources that allows those that regulate these monopolies to be captured. The answer would be a whole lot more funding for the Justice Department to do that. Who's really upset about Justice Department funding? If you look at polls of what people vote about, do you think Justice Department funding is high on the list? I don't think I've ever seen it as a list on a list of voter desires. But in terms of maybe payoff to a consumer, I think it could be really, really high payoff. So what I'm trying to do is mix in a little, getting ready for the final and mixing in a little chapter 11 here. And now that brings us back to X inefficiencies. So first of all, and I'll come back to this 13. What does this mean? Notice that you're at this point here, your costs are here at this quantity X. Should change that to quantity X, things to fix. You could have your costs at this level, but your costs are higher. So an X inefficiency simply is a company producing at costs higher than they could be. Remember, there were three types. What does it sound like? What does it sound like, smart or a dumb thing? Very good, both, right? So we have three different types. Smart company, oops, dyslexia. Dyslexia, my old friend. And then regulated monopoly. So tech being the smart answer or the smart example. In tech, wow, shoot, maybe not anymore, not with Facebook or sorry, Meta and Twitter and Amazon. recently laying off, I think, well, 3,000 and then I think 10,000 each for the other, 3,000 at Twitter approximately. Tech's going through a hard time because we're doing amazing things. We're actually going out and being with one another now again. It's pretty amazing. So they're not doing as well. But I don't think there are big layoffs at Google. I don't think there are big layoffs at Apple right now. So let's think about those kind of tech companies. What's the key to the realm there to success, to being in tech? Yeah, research and development. And so what's key to that? What do you need to do good research and development? Money, but okay, you have money. Now what do you need? You want smart people, right? You want talent. And so how do you attract and retain talent? Free lunch, which Twitter got rid of, right? They used to have free lunch. No such thing as a free lunch, economists say. Well, there, free lunch. But it was for something, right? So economists say there's no such thing as a free lunch, because if you get a free lunch, what does somebody want? They want something in return. So Twitter was giving a free lunch, but they wanted you to stay there, stay at the campus, work hard. Examples of all kinds of amenities at various workplaces. So Smart would likely be a company that's trying to attract and retain talent. So you might write that there however you want. Dumb would be, I mean, you come up with an idea of dumb. Hey, what should you not spend money on in your barbershop? What would not be a good? Would be a terrible thing. What have you seen other barbershops do that's just like, what in the world? Like Jersey, the place where you go and drink beer and get a haircut. Okay, thank you. That's what I thought too. It's my haircut. It's not a chill thing. It's my haircut. I want a beer in sports. But have they succeeded? What that place was called? Something Cuts and Brews. I think you're thinking Jersey Mike's. I was too. Are they doing well? Has anybody had a beer and got a haircut?
I don't know. Thing. I think a few in like LA.
So maybe it is smart and not dumb. Yeah. So they must be successful. I was trying to go for that as dumb. I mean, you're with me. So is every bar. Yeah. Hold on. Let's not get sidetracked here. So what we're thinking about is a business buying things, spending money on things they don't need. That's dumb, right? So you think of, you don't need an example, but just state that that's what it is. Buying, spending money on things that you absolutely don't need for your production. In the smart, of course, you don't need free lunch or a gym, but it's smart because you want to attract and retain talent. Maybe good investments, yeah, certainly in R&D, maybe more R&D than your competitors, so you can stay ahead of the curve. All right. I'm going to have us draw, for regulated monopoly, we need to do something new here, so we are going to. Now note, there's going to be one sheet, and we practice this on monopoly on some of your tests where you do the calculations and draw out the area of profit. But I'm not going to otherwise ask you to redraw these graphs, although this is part of another question, but I'm going to have you interpret these. So I do want us, though, to be able to interpret this. Yeah, let's draw this out. So let's do this X and Y axis. Let's make this relatively large. Put $sign here, representing cost and revenue, quantity here. Here is regulated monopoly pricing. So here's the dilemma for those regulating a regulated monopoly. At what price should we allow them to charge? So since this is a monopoly, demand for this product should be relatively inelastic, right? Relatively high. Well, yeah, of course, that is the correct answer, relatively high, because if it's a regulated monopoly, it's something the public needs, right? Water service, sewer service, electricity, and I guess cable TV, right? But that is a regulated monopoly. It's something stay informed, I guess, in a democracy if television news informs you. So we have a relatively steep demand curve. Remember, we have a marginal revenue curve that comes in halfway between the origin and the x-intercept of the demand curve. Because recall, as demand is increasing, as quantity is increasing, we're charging a lower price. So our marginal revenue is decreasing rather than staying the same compared to perfect competition. Let's show our average total cost curve here. Let's show our marginal cost curve coming in through that minimum point of ATC. All right, what am I going to ask you when I see you on the street? Well, that's the answer. Where do companies maximize their profits? Well, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. So at this point right here, marginal revenue equals marginal cost. We're going to call the QP profit, just spell it out, profit max. Notice, go up to the demand curve, over to the y-axis. This is price profit max. Can you see where that area of profit is? I haven't drawn the cost yet, but where would I draw the cost and where would the area of profit be? Yeah, so if I was going to draw this, here I draw a line there, and that area there would be profits. Don't do that. We're not needing to do, I'm just trying you to visualize it. Okay, we could just allow regulated monopolies to charge the highest price possible. The problem is the quantity would be lower, and it wouldn't be something to be available to everybody. And if it's a regulated monopoly, we want it available to everybody. So generally, this is not the price we allow them to pay or to charge. The other price you could allow them to charge is this one right here. So this one's we call fair return. So right there where demand meets ATC, call that Q fair return. P what two things are we getting here that's pretty good? Well, for the consumer first. Yeah, more of it available and a lower price. And then note here is both my price, here is both my ATC curve. If this is both cost and revenue, what are they making? Yeah, so at this point right here, this is the company making a normal profit. Which means, and in this case, a lot of these companies are publicly traded, who's happy? Well, the consumer, but normal profit means who's happy? Well, in this case, these are publicly held companies, so who's happy? Who are? Stockholders, right? So in this case, the stockholders of PG&E are happy because PG&E is paying all its costs and they're getting just enough of a return. Remember, that's the idea of a normal profit. Now, what would be perfect for us would be to have them charge the price down here just at their marginal cost. But hold on, don't draw this. Let me just show you something. If they're producing right here, where are their costs? Up here, what are you guaranteeing your PG&E is running at? Yeah, there would be a loss right there. I mean, PG&E's got some problems. You want to add some more problems so they have less money to fix things? I mean, you decide. Or we could all just go solar or, live in the woods with fireplaces and candles. But that's probably not a great. This is the perfect place for an economist, but it is also not tenable. You don't want them to earn a loss. Now, here coming back to the regulated monopoly. What's it in my interest to do? And this gets back to my story working for a regulated monopoly when I came out of Chico State back in '91. I went to go work for Pacific Bell, a regulated monopoly of the phone. This is back when phones were phones, which, man, it's amazing. I got to explain it. Back when there was a line from that phone to a central office, skateboarders go to Chestnut and Third, I think it is, where there's a big building right there, Chestnut and Third, across the street from a kind of wild frat. Went to a party there once, where they filmed a porn there years ago too. You don't know this wild frat? It's like Psi Delta something. Delta? No, that's from is it really? It is Delta Psi Delta. Yeah, that one. So right next to Delta Psi Delta is this giant room with giant building. Yeah. Okay. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, no. Well, but at least I'm placing it, right? So that building right there, horribly. Are they still a frat? They've been disbanded? Okay. No one wants to be associated. Yeah, don't join it. Next door to that is this giant building that used to hold this enormous computer. I mean, you walked in there, you had levels of computers on each floor, and the line from every phone would go into that computer, and then it would go into another giant room-sized computer that would switch your phone calls all over the world. We now don't need that because we have this thing called the internet, and that just runs over the internet right there. So that building is kind of a sad waste of money now. Yeah. Safer in terms of tapping. Oh shoot, man. We called them tapped and traces. And so you would often get requests from the cops to do tap trace on phones from the central office, and they'd send in an order and they'd tap people's phones and they'd trace all their calls. It was very easy on those machines to do. We had direct conduit to law enforcement to do it. Now on IP, I imagine that's quite difficult. I'm not going to say impossible, but that's got to be a lot more difficult. IP meaning internet protocol. To be able to tap this phone that's going over the internet, there's an IP address. I assume there's a way to do it, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. You can break any code. But I just to answer your question, it was super easy on the old stuff. This has got to be harder to do, but I'm sure it can be done. Where was I? What's it in my interest to do? Back in the old days, when I was at Pac Bell, remember my story about them? We had a lagoon with geese and coots and swans. Now, as the input to telephone service is one of the inputs to make telephone service swan or geese or free lunch or a nice gym or paying for my college when they didn't need to, right? They just spent money, sent us on conferences, gave us so many boondoggle trips, not because they liked us, because they wanted their costs to be higher, right? If your cost structure is higher, what do you get to charge? Higher price. And so the problem with a regulated monopoly is oftentimes they will just inflate their costs because they're guaranteed to get a percentage return. Remember, within this ATC curve for an economist, it's not just your explicit cost, but your implicit cost, meaning a normal profit. So if you have higher costs and you're getting a percentage of your costs as a profit, you're going to get higher profits. So let's go back to what we were doing here. Here, the reality is that regulated monopolies might have costs higher than they're capable of because they are regulated on a cost plus basis. Now you put that into words in your own style. And so what are we supposed to have? We're supposed to have good regulatory structures. The Public Utility Commission is supposed to look at cost structures and ensure that they are charging a price that is not too exorbitant for a consumer, because it's for a product or a service. You need to live a human life. Now, remember, they're human beings who are in this Public Utilities Commission. Again, same story, regulatory capture. What do I do if I am Pac Bell? I give really lucrative consulting contracts to people who've been nice to me, that have allowed me to charge higher prices and don't look into my costs. And then what is the next person going to do if they're on principle? The next people on the PUC, they might be incented to, oh, if I do this, I get that job. Again, regulatory capture. So throughout all of these things where we see there's some economic benefit in our system, there's all these chances for corruption. What's the answer for that? Do we outlaw people from government regulatory bodies to become consultants. You could pass a federal law for that, and a state law for that.
You're basically,
You get a
you
choice.
can't go working for this if you work there.
You get an ultimatum of jobs.
I have to say I'm not a lawyer, so, but I'm pretty sure stuff like this has been put into law. No doubt it'd be challenged all the way to the Supreme Court, right? And so you're getting to the problem there. Like some people automatically, feel, rightfully so, we live in America, you should be allowed to do what you want to do with your life and not be restricted. But understand that freedom has costs. And that cost is that people then go on to work for the companies. And that's a way to corrupt people who are supposed to be regulating our system. Right. Right. You have the freedom not to go into a regulatory body, which then maybe, okay, that brings up another problem. Maybe the people going into the regulatory body, maybe people wouldn't be incented to even be a regulator. And you'd get bottom of the barrel regulators. I don't know if that's a bad idea, though. I mean, we want regulators who are tough. You want to hire real jerks, right? Jerks for the people. Now, how do we get jerks for the people? I mean, one answer might be to pay them really well and have a really ironclad contract for employment with kind of like a non-disclosure clause that some contracts have that say you cannot disclose anything that happened at work. If you choose to, so back to choice, if you choose to work for us, you cannot be a consultant. There, I don't think there'd be any kind of constitutional problem, but if you've agreed to that to be a part of it. So, I mean, again, is that high on our list of political priorities? No, and to an economist, it absolutely should be, because we are being swindled by companies that have concentrated power. That's the reality. And now to the diagrams that show that swindling, coming to this page here. Oh, my bad. So 13. So let's say there's a company, and maybe I'll do this. Company A, and maybe I'll say there's company B. I'm just circling things I might add to the test. Company A, company B. So they still have economies of scale. Do you get what I mean? Yet to exhaust, right? If they made more, they could have lower costs. What might these two companies do? Merge, yeah. Remember the story, the reality that Miller Brewing and Coors actually brought their bottling operations together. Now, those two companies are actually competitors. They brought their bottling operations together so they could achieve economies of scale. Both have lower costs, but then just to compete on the demand side, right? Compete on the revenue side. Now, mergers. So another thing from chapter 11. Mergers are another way to monopolize an industry. Mergers are, by law, adjudicated by the Federal Trade Commission. Federal Trade Commission looks at whether or not two companies are in the same industry, and whether or not their two products are, what do you think? What are they looking for? Similar or substitutes, even better, meaning they're looking at their what kind of elasticity? Hayden, say with confidence. Yes, they look at the cross price elasticity. Remember the cross price elasticity? The price of this good changes. How much does the quantity of this good change? And if the price went up on this one and quantity went up on that one, right, two different things. So they're positive. So that number is positive. That tells you those two things are close substitutes. Very good. And they actually look at that number. They calculate that number to see if they're close substitutes. If they're really too close of substitutes, they know that that merger will monopolize an industry, and they have the legal basis to then block that merger. Do we do that enough in this country? According to economists of all stripes, well, there's some on the far conservative right who believe, and there's the point of fact in this, that nothing has lasted forever. No company has lasted forever. No monopoly has lasted forever. And so if you're sad about a monopoly, we'll out-innovate them. So that's the conservative side. Just about everybody else, and there are very few even conservatives who buy that. It's a really extreme position. we know that these monopolies are harming welfare for an entire society, so we need to clamp down on them more. But our Justice Department hasn't, because they, again, what don't they have? They don't have the resources to do it. And so we have throughout many, many industries, and I've shown you a graph once, maybe I'll get to it next class, that just shows in every industry in our country between 1996 and the 2000s, and even the 2014s, they have become more and more concentrated. In other words, companies have come from being monopolistically competitive, moving towards what? Not yet monopoly, but in between. Oligopoly. So we've got more of an oligopolistic market, meaning fewer companies controlling everything that we buy. Witness our phones, right? As I've told you, we pay double, I think even more of what Europeans pay for better service than we do. Why? They have more competition. We don't legislate, we don't enact our laws like they do. They are vicious or maybe beautifully efficient in making sure there's more competition for their consumers. Here in the United States, the business of America is business, and many people feel that that is laissez-faire is the best policy. Laissez-faire is French for let it be. That is, if there's a monopoly, if there are people joining, let it be. That's as opposed to an activist. And so most economists are activists because we know the math and graphing behind monopolies and the welfare losses from monopolies, and believe we should be blocking mergers and breaking companies like Amazon up. But again, that takes resources and money, right? Which we don't put towards the Justice Department. Questions on this before I move on? Are any of you pissed and ready to go out and vote on this? Go protest? Throw paint on throw yogurt on a famous painting? Or with a soup? Oh, okay. But yeah, without getting into the mechanics of that protest, that is about, climate changing and our landscape changing. That's a pretty big deal in my mind. Yeah, let's not get into that, right? It's a pretty big deal, that's happening. I think this is a pretty big deal too, right? This isn't the end of our ecosystem, but it is companies taking advantage. And we have another model. We just look to Europe and we go, oh, look, prices are lower and quality is better. Why don't we do that? We don't, because our political system is corrupted, right? We have campaigns that are financed by people and by interests that are able to provide money anonymously and in huge numbers. And if they're doing it anonymously, there's something to hide, right? Bottom line. And oftentimes that is companies trying to make sure that whoever we elect are people that are not going to fund the Justice Department, not hold hearings and saying, Justice Department, why aren't you breaking up this monopolies? We all could have a much higher standard of living, to make a more economic argument, if we chose to pursue these things. If we, so for example, chose to have public financing of political campaigns. Every single person gets the same amount of money. You're not allowed to spend more. Here it is, end of story. You don't get any advantage by bringing in corporate money and backing your corporate backers when it comes to policy. Are you willing for some of your tax dollars to go to campaigns? Because that's one solution. Is that a very exciting thing to hear about? My money is going to a politician? I'm not saying a lot of, no, it's privately financed. It doesn't come from the government. In general, I'm missing your point, but I mean, in general, campaigns are financed by outside donors, right? Not by the public. So I'm just trying to give you a solution there. There's a solution out there. We just don't choose it. And it's to the detriment of all of our standards of living. But we in capitalism are so drawn by entertainment. And if you followed anything about my talk when you guys were away, most of you for Thanksgiving. So capitalism does, it kind of drains us from, so quick critique, drains us from our real true selves. So we find ourselves in commodities, we find ourselves in always buying more things, and we become numb to the fact that the system is one that is corrupting and sucking the life out of us and sucking the money out of us through that cycle of corruption. Ready to march to the barricades, anyone? I have one person with me, maybe two. All right, comrades. And I say that half in jest, but actually, you're looking at me like I'm serious, and yeah, I am. This is really something that could be changed, but we're so Worried about what? Some stupid Nazi on Alex Jones talk, right? Worried about that when that doesn't matter, right? It really doesn't matter. He's an idiot, you know. But we are all getting paid, we are all paying much more for lower quality service. That matters, but no, we're talking about that, right? They don't, right? Well, go home to your family over Christmas and pound the dinner table and convince your family if you choose to. You know what? Most people would fall asleep. Right? All right, moving on. Thanks for your kind attention to that. I could see that you were maybe a little moved by my passions there. All right, to this here, note that here there are two curves that aren't showing up very well. I've corrected that, so the next when it prints out on the final, it should be better, but notice those should be right there and there. All right, so A, B, C, and D. Go through and answer 1 and 2 here. So first of all, which is each in terms of market structure, and then which do they represent? Firm, industry, both, or neither? Feel free to talk to each other, help each other out. I know this is challenging, but I'm giving it to you beforehand, so you can study it and nail this. Once again, online, this should be available of the 27 notes. All right, so these two both represent the same thing, which is, yeah, so this is the industry. Remember, that's the representative firm. So A and B, perfect comp. Yeah, that's the industry, that's the firm. And this firm and industry is in right now. Everyone's only making a normal profit. What does that mean? In the long run, that's equilibrium. Always it'll come back to everyone just making a normal profit. Because remember, when there's profits, people will join the industry to get rid of those profits. When there are losses, people will leave the industry to alleviate those profits. That, by the way, is this question right here, where you're going to have to draw out the industry and the firm. So we'll come back to that probably next class. All right, here is a monopoly. You know what I'm going to likely add? I'm going to put oligopoly, but I'm going to say a non-collusive oligopoly. Meaning they're not wait, sorry, my bad. Collusive. Non-collusive was that weird kinked thing that I'm not going to test you on. That kinked demand curve we went over last class. But if an oligopoly, meaning a few companies, say 3 or 4, and given there are only 3 or 4, it makes something illegal very easy. That is collusion, working together to set prices, working together to divide up territory. Companies have been, I have a presentation I could give to you that goes over parts for all of our PCs, parts for any German, or any Japanese made car, any cell phone service, where companies that were doing finance for home loans, all of them have been convicted in recent years of colluding and paid fines, and those fines were likely much less than the profit they made from colluding. And this is another story about the Justice Department doesn't have the funds to pay for the quality enough legal team to go up against powerhouse companies. And so companies, when there's suits filed against them for colluding, they will settle out of court. Why? The government doesn't have the resources to go up against all those corporate lawyers. And so they settle out of court for a fine. That is that really something that's going to deter them in the future? Maybe a little, but not much if they're making profit greater than that from colluding. So another point on that. And the only time you can prove collusion is when you have inside information from the colluding company. So you're somebody who's making hundreds of thousands of dollars. You know, it's at the VP level or higher of a company, right? Hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to put this money at risk, and I'm going to go down to the Justice Department. Now that's heroic, but how many people are going to do that? And so there's a movie with Matt Damon called, I know, don't list it, Matt Damon movies. Wasn't a very popular one. The Imposter, The Imposer, Thank you, The Informant. So Matt Damon played a real character in a real scheme where Archer Daniel Midland and these other companies in Korea colluded on lysine and some other additive to feed for chickens. So they were the only companies that made these additives that fatten up our chicken. And they actually have FBI footage of them in a room. And one of them, I think, says, the FBI better not be watching. And they all giggle, and you're watching a black and white surveillance video. I could show that to you maybe next class. And the reason why the FBI came in is because a senior executive of that company, played by Matt Damon, decided he was going to turn in his own company. But the character Matt Damon plays, and by the way, the movie is a comedy, is so off. He actually thinks he's going to get rewarded by turning in his company. He actually believes that they're going to make him president because he's turning in the company. And so the guy is giving up his $300,000 job to turn in his company thinking they'd reward him. Well, of course, they're not going to reward him. I mean, that's probably a horrible thing in reality to be, that you're not rewarded for doing the right thing, but only somebody who's a little deluded, apparently, is kind of the theme of that movie, is going to turn in their own company to their own detriment, right? And you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt to convict a company. A company is a person under US law, right? It's not the executive, it's the person. And so you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt that company knew about it. And that's, you know, are many companies going to have documents saying, okay, we all agree to a collusive agreement? These are what we call, and this is sexist, but I think it's appropriately sexist, it's a gentleman's agreement. As more women become corrupt and join the C-suite and get up there, we need to call it a gentle person's agreement, and hopefully more women will get up there, hopefully not be as corrupt. Maybe there will be a gender effect there. We can only hope. But a gentleman's agreement, or one day a gentle person's agreement, would be that they simply agree not to compete, right? And get together and maybe just say, you know, something general about what their prices might be in the future, and just all raise their prices in unison. And they do it in a way without a document. And how are you going to prove that? You're only going to prove that if one of them gives up the other. And that's how are you going to get that to happen? So the answer to this is changing the human soul. How are we doing on that? I don't know if there's a legal remedy to this. Any thoughts? I think it gets, so Adam Smith, the founder of modern economics, gets lost a lot of the time because what he said in one of his books called The Theory of Moral Sentiments is that you cannot have a long-lasting capitalist system without a moral structure in a society that people agree to. And if you lose that moral structure, your economy, your society will not do well, and eventually the economy will deteriorate. And so our moral structure apparently is a little off, maybe a lot off. And from his point of view, that people don't often know, where he's just thought of as somebody, no, maximize profits, keep costs low, you know, don't treat your work. No, that's part of it. Specialization, all that. The other part was, no, we need to have a moral framework. Otherwise, it's just going to be everybody getting over on somebody else. There's a great show called The Wire. Has anybody seen The Wire? Best show ever. Yeah, don't binge before finals. But there's this character on there who says, we used to make things in this country. Now everybody's just got their hand in the next guy's pocket. And for me, I don't know if that hits you, but it really hits me that I see that we're kind of a get over society now. How can I get over on somebody else? How can I win this? Rather than how can we as a society win together? And this is what Adam Smith said, that you cannot efficiently operate without that moral structure. And given what I'm saying about collusion being rife, you know, I think the answer is, you know, I was saying it kind of tongue in cheek, some kind of awakening of a moral structure in our country. Thoughts? How are we going to get that? I have a lot of faith in your generation. Do you? You guys don't have faith in yourselves? Your values are a lot stronger than my generation's values. What's that? For those of you who are showing up and doing your work, you're doing great work. You're not any worse than any of my classes over 20-year career. That used to be the case before COVID. It was going down, down, down. And then something woke up, I think. I'm hoping that disaster is an opportunity, that somehow we saw the need for other people, and maybe even the need to treat each other well, and maybe even the need to work hard. I don't know. As I've said, I have to be optimistic. 'Cause I'm a teacher. You wouldn't want a dour old man up here saying that the world's going to hell all the time. I do, as an economist, bring up problems, but remember, the focus is always in economics. Here's the problem, but more importantly, how do we solve it? All right, let's come back to this. Think about that. I need you to save society, all right? So, down here, D is a monopoly, or, got me off on a tangent, but an appropriate tangent, a collusive oligopoly. A is an industry, B is the firm. Oh, C, what is C? Not totally elastic demand, so there are differences in the products, but there is choice there. Monopolistic competition. On that note, let's turn this over real quick. What words do we associate with monopolistic and competition that help explain the contradiction between them? Monopolistic means what? What are they trying to do? Yeah, but they're trying to make you think they're the best product, but you have differentiation. So and competition is because, we're talking taco joints. No, what was your taco joint? It wasn't very differentiated there with that stutter there. Tacos Mary. You forget the name. So, and then I say La Cocina Economica, right? So what do we have? We've differentiated in each other's mind, but we have what? Choices, right? So choices is the competition. Come back over, finish this real quickly. So C, remember, between our taco places, between restaurants, if demand is out here and one company is making profits, if a restaurant, all restaurants in Chico are making profits, what's going to happen? More restaurants, and then people will go to those other restaurants and will come back to a normal profit. If there is loss taking place in restaurants, then those restaurants will leave, and then the consumers will go to the remaining ones and always come back to a normal profit. So this is what? Firm or industry? Yeah, good. It's a firm. And if D is just a monopoly, this is, oh, that's interesting. No. If D is a monopoly and collusive oligopoly, this is, yeah, it's both. Neither is what we call a distractor. You guys call it tricky, right? It's something on a test that isn't going to be an answer. We call it distractors. You call us a-holes. Do I want to do more? No. Let's do that next class. Please look this over before our next class. Have a great day.